In recent years, it has become fashionable to judge people and events from the past on the basis of values of the present. That's a pretty true statement. And why am I turning the camera on and saying that? Well, guess what? I'm reading a book. I don't do book reviews very often. And I don't think I've ever done a book review on a book I haven't even read yet, but I'm so fired up about this book. And you Nova Scotians out there, you're probably going to you should take a close look at this book. Newfoundlanders, you probably might be interested in this too. Because this deals with, I guess we'll call it the conflict between the past so-called leaders of our society versus the present leaders of the Indigenous community. I'm not here to take sides, I'm just here to read a book. Accordingly, in reviewing the history of Nova Scotia, no person has been maligned to the extent of which the founder of Halifax, Governor Edward Cornwallis, has been villainized. There's no question Cornwallis was a tough guy, perhaps even brutal. Ask any Scot who survived the Battle of Culloden and the ensuing Highland clearance. But was Cornwallis in fact so much the villain as he's been portrayed? Especially by historical writers or contemporary reporters in the current statue controversy? I guess that statue came down about a year ago now. Well, before there was Cornwallis, there was a guy that looked something like this. Abbe Jean-Louis Le Loutre. Nobody really knows much about this guy because he always did his work from behind the scenes. But before Cornwallis started killing the Indigenous, it was the French, specifically this priest, a French priest, was the one who convinced the Micmac that they needed to kill these English settlers. Prior to that, my understanding is they actually somewhat got along. But it was actually the war between the French and the English. Both of them, obviously, discovering North America and wanting to fight over it. Specifically, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and parts of New England. Sure, Cornwallis had a lot of people killed. But Monsieur Le Loutre, I wouldn't say he brainwashed the Micmacs, but he encouraged them to go and attack the English and to bring back their scalps. All because the French wanted to be more powerful than the English in North America. So yeah, there are bad guys in the story, but there are others. Read this book. It's brand new. It's a history of one of the most controversial figures that you've never heard of. And a cheap plug, the author, of course, is my father. But don't buy it because he's my dad. Write it because he's written 20 books, most of which are history-based. Write it because my cat is even intrigued about it. Hi, Dasher. Are you going to move out of the way so people can see the rest of my conversation? Take a look at that book cover, the name. I hope I'm holding the camera right. New World Publishing. It's a thin little book, but the pages are small. There's lots of pictures, the text. And it's been written as if there was a guy sitting down interviewing this guy. Not a lot of information out there about this guy, but he appears in everybody else's books. He's just not the main character. So my father probably read 100 different books about this time period, the 1700s. Yeah, so what happened? In 1737, the French sent out a young priest who had no love for the English, and he developed close relationships with the Micmac leaders. Ultimately became the guerrilla strategist who gave essential advice and direction to the Micmac leaders. as well as some of the Acadian rebels. Okay. 1947, a force from New England captured Louisbourg, which was meant to be the indomitable French fortress that would set up the St. Lawrence fur trade. However, it was returned to the French. By that time, Le Loutre had his spurs and quietly from behind the scenes gave advice and direction to the Micmac warriors and the Beausoleil. My French isn't the greatest. In making devastating raids, including brutal deaths, scalping, to scare the British from really taking control of Nova Scotia. Indeed, the French government in France and Quebec funded Le Loutre to buy scalps. Consequently, a year later, 1749, the English determined that they had to build a fortress of their own, which they could take control of Nova Scotia, which they felt was theirs. To make this happen, they sent out Cornwallis to set up with a mandate to settle Nova Scotia. And to do that, he realized not that he had to take out Micmac, but he had to get Le Loutre out of there. Well, I'm going to read this book because I'm intrigued. Let's go back to that title. It has become fashionable to judge people and events from the past on the basis of the values of the present. I can put that in a whole context very different and apply it to my own life. Transgender. There's a hot topic. Look at the way I was treated when I came out as trans in 2007, 8, and 9. Compare it to how I've been treated in 2021. Look at other trans people, how they were treated. I lost my job, essentially because I was trans. But you know what? That was the norm back then. Were they horrible people for firing me for being trans? No. They're not necessarily horrible people. I get it. Big difference between firing someone and scalping them or whatever, taking their head off, but still, in the context of the situation, if and when I do write my own book and my own memoirs, I will try to keep this in mind. And I'm not going to paint people out to be villains just because what they did 20 years ago doesn't match the values of today. So yeah, I know it's, what's the word? Politically correct, fashionable to listen just to one side of the story, the Indigenous story. But the Cornwallises and all these other statues that are coming down, there's a side to that story too, and these people are all dead, so they can't tell it. There's an opportunity to learn about these people, and maybe Cornwallis wasn't so bad. Maybe it was actually Monsieur Le Loutre is the person you should be angry at. And I'm going to read this book and then give you an honest critique of the history of what actually happened. But I'm really excited to read this. If you see this in a bookstore or Amazon, give it a pickup. If you want an autographed copy, well, see what I can do. My dad, he has a big ego, but he's also humble. He just doesn't believe that anyone would actually want his autograph. But you never know. I know I have it. Thank you, Dad. I'm looking forward to this book. And keep writing. And we're getting old there, but the life my dad has lived has been phenomenal. He's done so many different jobs. He's traveled all over the world. He's worked with and met with so many different people. There's definitely a memoir out there. Peter McCreath, please write it, because I want to read it. Those are my thoughts for the day, everyone. Have a good night.